Mason walked slowly through the dark hallway. His flashlight flickered as he stepped over broken wires and crushed panels. The air smelled like old metal and dust. This place had been abandoned for years. Some said it was dangerous. Others said it was haunted. Mason didn't care. He wasn't here for stories. He was here for parts. Anything valuable he could sell. His boots made soft echoes on the metal floor. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly in blue. Alien tech, definitely. Maybe Prexari, or some forgotten race. He didn't recognize the language, but he knew one thing. This facility wasn't human. He passed a broken door and peeked inside. Empty. Just smashed consoles and torn wires. He sighed and kept moving. Then he heard something. A soft sound. Not a machine. Not metal. It was breathing. Mason stopped. He turned off his flashlight and listened. At first, only silence. Then, there it was again. Slow, shaky breathing, like someone trying not to be heard. His heart began to race. Was someone else here? Another scavenger. Carefully, he followed the sound. Down another corridor, then left into a dark chamber. A broken sign hung from the ceiling. He couldn't read it, but the room felt colder. The walls were smooth, and the lights here were still working, though dim. They gave off a strange, greenish glow. In the center of the room stood a glass containment pod, old, cracked, and still locked shut. But behind the pod, something moved. Mason stepped forward. And then he saw her, an alien woman. Pale blue-purplish skin. Thin, almost fragile. Her arms were chained above her head, and her clothes looked like torn medical fabric. Her hair was tangled, and her body was shaking. She looked weak, like she hadn't eaten in days. Her eyes opened, large and full of fear. When she saw him, she pressed herself back against the wall as much as the chains allowed. Her voice cracked as she spoke. Please, don't eat me." Mason froze. "Eat her?" He blinked, confused. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. She didn't believe him. Her arms trembled, and she turned her face away. Mason felt a strange twist in his chest. Whoever she was terrified. And clearly, she thought he was some kind of monster. He looked at the chains. Alien metal, sealed tight. He couldn't unlock them without tools. Mason crouched down and opened his bag. Slowly, carefully, he pulled out a small protein bar. It was all he had left. He unwrapped it and placed it on the floor a few feet from her. Then he backed away. The alien woman looked at the bar. She didn't move, didn't speak. "It's food," Mason said. "You can eat it. I won't stop you." Still no response. After a moment, she reached out with one trembling hand. The chains rattled as she stretched her fingers, barely touching the edge of the bar. She pulled it closer, sniffed it, then took a small bite. Her eyes widened. She took another, faster bite. Then another. Within seconds, the bar was gone. Mason said nothing. He just watched. When she finished, she looked up at him again. Her breathing slowed a little. Her eyes still held fear, but now, also confusion. "Why? Feed me," she asked softly. "Because you looked hungry," Mason said. She stared at him for a long time. He sat down on a broken crate nearby, keeping his hands where she could see them. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said, "Syria." Mason nodded. "I'm Mason." The silence between them was heavy but calmer now. Syria leaned against the wall, clearly exhausted. Mason looked around the room. No cameras, no guards. Just rusted metal, silence, and a mystery. Why was she here? Who put her in chains? And why did she think humans eat aliens? He had more questions than answers. And then, suddenly, one of the wall panels blinked red. A low beep sounded, echoing through the room. Mason stood up quickly. What was that? Syria's face turned pale. Something woke up. Mason turned toward the hallway. His flashlight flickered again. And in the distance, something growled. The growling sound echoed through the corridor like a warning from the shadows. Mason turned around fast and pointed his flashlight toward the hallway. The beam shook slightly in his hand. He didn't know what made that sound, but it didn't feel friendly. Saria pressed herself tighter against the wall. Her chains clinked as she shivered. "It's awake. It's hunting again," she whispered. "What is it?" Mason asked, his voice low. Saria looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "They kept something here. It escaped before. Then it went quiet. I thought it died." Mason's grip on his flashlight tightened. "We need to get you out of those chains." He pulled out a small tool from his bag, a cutter with a heating tip. It wasn't made for alien locks, but maybe it would help. He knelt beside the wall and pressed the tool against one of the metal cuffs around her wrist. It hissed, smoke rising. Saria flinched. "I'm not hurting you," Mason said gently. "Just hold still." She nodded slowly, but her arms trembled. While the tool worked, Mason glanced at her face. She still looked scared, not just because of the growling, but because of him. It was clear now that she didn't trust him yet. "Why did you think I would eat you?" he asked. Saria didn't answer right away. Then she said softly, "Your kind are spoken of in whispers, stories from long ago. The humans came in fire. They destroyed everything. Some say you feed on us." Mason sighed. "That's not true. Not all humans are like that." "Then why did you come here?" "I was looking for parts to sell. I didn't know this place had people, or anyone alive at all." The cutter beeped, "Done." Mason gently removed the first cuff. Saria rubbed her wrist slowly, still watching him. He moved to the other cuff. "You're not like the stories," she said quietly. "Neither are you," Mason replied with a small smile. "I've never met anyone like you before." Suddenly, the lights above them flickered. The green glow dimmed, then blinked off and on again. The growling returned, closer this time. Mason worked faster. "Almost there," he muttered. The final cuff popped open with a hiss. Saria's arms dropped. She winced but managed to stay on her feet. She was weak, but she was free. "Can you walk?" Mason asked. She nodded slowly. "Not fast, but I'll try." He offered his hand. She hesitated, then placed her fingers in his. Her touch was cold and unsure. They moved quickly down the hall. Mason led, flashlight in one hand, the other guiding Saria. The sounds behind them grew louder. Heavy footsteps, a strange, wet-breathing sound. Something big was coming. They turned a corner and entered a control room. Broken screens lined the walls, and a shattered desk sat in the center. Mason shut the door behind them and looked for anything useful. Saria sat on the floor, breathing hard. "This was the main monitoring area," she said. "They used to watch us from here." "Who's they?" "The scientists, from another world. Not yours. They took many of us. We were tests to them." Mason found an old data pad. It was still powered. He tapped the screen. Most of it was broken code, but one file opened, a video recording. The screen flickered, showing a clean lab. Several alien creatures were locked in cages. A voice spoke in another language. Then the camera focused on Saria, chained just like he had found her. The voice said something. The translation appeared in subtitles. Subject 7 shows high energy response to stress. Begin emotional trigger test. The video showed Saria being exposed to loud sounds and flashing lights. She screamed. The scientists only took notes. Mason shut it off, angry. "That was you," he said. Saria nodded. "They wanted to see how fear changed my energy. I didn't understand then. I still don't." He sat beside her. "You didn't deserve that." For a moment, they sat in silence. Then, a loud bang came from the door. The thing had found them. "We have to move." Mason said. Scifi stood slowly. There's a passage, through the back. He helped her up, and they pushed through a half-broken panel behind one of the consoles. It led into a dark tunnel. Mason looked back one last time. Another loud bang. The metal door began to bend inward. Let's go, he said. They disappeared into the tunnel, the creature's roars echoing behind them. The tunnel was narrow and dark, the air thick with dust. Mason moved first, holding his flashlight low. Scifi followed behind, her steps light but slow. She was still weak, but she tried to stay quiet. The creature's growls were fading now, but both of them knew it hadn't given up. It was still hunting. They moved deeper into the passage, which twisted like a maze. Strange pipes ran along the walls, some leaking a green mist. Mason covered his mouth with his sleeve. What kind of place was this? He asked quietly. Scifi didn't answer right away. She was staring at the walls. Her fingers traced the symbols carved into the metal. This was never just a lab, she finally said. It was a prison, a test ground. They'd brought many like me here. You mean other aliens? Yes, some were strong. Some had powers they didn't understand. The scientists, they wanted to control all of it. Mason paused. But why? Why take you? Scifi looked down. They said I had something special in my blood. They never explained what. Only that I could activate certain machines even they feared. Mason frowned. That explained the strange equipment he'd seen earlier. And maybe why the creature was still here. They reached a door at the end of the tunnel. It was rusted, but Mason forced it open. Behind it was a large chamber filled with old data cores, some still blinking. This is where they stored the records, Scifi said. Mason stepped inside and looked around. If there's a way to shut down that monster, it might be in here. Scifi nodded and walked over to one of the consoles. She placed her hand on a glowing panel, and to Mason's surprise, it lit up. You control it? He asked. Only some systems, she said softly. My body reacts to their tech. The screen displayed alien text, but it shifted into simple symbols Mason could almost understand. Scifi tapped through menus, her fingers moving slowly. What's this file? Mason pointed at an old log marked with a red symbol. Scifi opened it. A hologram appeared, showing the scientists in a lab. A large tank held a dark shape, twisted and moving. Test 46B is unstable. Subject Alpha now rejects commands. Warning issued. Lockdown recommended. Another voice spoke. Specimen 7 may be the key to resetting the Alpha. Prepare her for transfer. The video ended. They'd wanted to use you. Like a key, Mason said quietly. Scifi nodded. They thought I could control it. But I never agreed. I was too afraid. No one should be forced like that. Mason said. They were wrong. Scifi looked at him, surprised by his words. For a moment, her fear softened. You are different from them. Mason checked his tools. If that thing's still active, we need a plan. She nodded. There's a command center near the surface. From there, we can open escape doors. But we must pass through the feeding zone. Mason raised an eyebrow. Feeding zone. It's where they kept the creature, where it learned to hunt. Mason sighed. Of course it is. They gathered what they could. An old map from the terminal, a few energy cells, and a shock baton. It wasn't much, but better than nothing. As they turned to leave, the lights flickered again. A cold wind swept through the chamber. Scifi shivered. It's coming. Mason handed her a small flashlight. Stay close, and if anything happens, run. They entered another tunnel, this one larger and more open. The walls were scratched, as if claws had dragged across them. Bones, both alien and unrecognizable, were scattered on the ground. Scifi held her breath. Mason moved slowly, his eyes scanning every shadow. A sudden sound, metal scraping on metal, made them stop. Then silence. They kept moving, one step at a time. They reached a fork in the path. The map showed both ways led to the command center, but one was shorter and went straight through the feeding zone. "We don't have much time," Mason said. "Let's take the fast route." Syria hesitated but nodded. "If we stay together, we might make it." They stepped into the next hallway. It was wide, open, and silent. Too silent. A chill ran down Mason's spine. Then, from above, something moved. A shadow dropped to the floor behind them. Not fully seen, but big. Wet skin, long arms, and glowing red eyes. The creature was there. It roared, and the sound shook the walls. Mason turned fast, grabbing Soraya's hand. "Run." They sprinted down the hall, the creature right behind them. Their footsteps echoed as the light flickered, running through shadows and fear, straight into the unknown. Mason and Soraya ran down the long hallway, the creature's loud footsteps shaking the metal floor behind them. Its roars echoed through the walls, a deep and terrible sound. The lights above them blinked wildly, as if they too were afraid. "This way," Mason shouted, pulling Soraya's hand. Her legs were weak, but she pushed herself to keep up. Fear gave her strength she didn't know she had. The path turned sharply, and they slid around the corner, nearly falling. Behind them, the creature growled again, closer. They rushed through a broken doorway and into a wide chamber filled with strange tanks and machines. Some tanks still had liquid inside. Others were broken open. Claw marks were everywhere. This had to be the feeding zone Soraya mentioned. "We need to hide," Mason said, looking around quickly. Soraya pointed to a stack of old crates in the corner. They ran over and crouched behind them, breathing hard. The air was thick and smelled like metal and old chemicals. For a moment, it was quiet. Then, the creature entered the chamber. It was huge, twice the size of Mason. Its arms were long, and its skin was wet and black, shining under the flickering lights. Red eyes glowed like fire, and its mouth was full of sharp teeth. It sniffed the air, then growled again. Soraya closed her eyes. Her body shook. Mason whispered, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The creature walked slowly between the tanks, sniffing the ground. Its claws scraped against the metal, leaving deep marks. It paused near their hiding place. Mason held his breath. He tightened his grip on the shock baton he had taken earlier. It might not stop the creature, but it was all he had. Then something strange happened. Soraya's skin began to glow faintly. A soft blue light, like a pulse, moved through her veins. Mason noticed it and looked at her with worry. "What's happening?" he whispered. "I don't know," she whispered back. "Sometimes, when I'm scared, it happens." The creature suddenly growled louder and turned its head toward them. "It sees us," Mason said. Soraya stood up slowly. "I have to try something." "No." Mason tried to stop her, but she stepped out from behind the crates. The creature froze. Soraya lifted her hand. The glow from her body became brighter. She looked afraid but calm. The creature snarled and took one step forward. Then Soraya spoke in a firm voice. "Stop." To Mason's surprise, the creature stopped moving. She spoke again, softer now. "I am not your enemy. You don't have to hurt us." The creature growled but didn't attack. Mason stared in disbelief. "You're talking to it." "I don't know how, but I feel something," she said, "like it knows me." She took a slow step forward. The creature didn't move. But just as hope started to rise, a loud noise came from one of the tanks. A broken pipe burst, spraying steam into the room. The creature roared, startled. Its eyes turned wild again, and it leaped forward. Mason jumped in front of Soraya and slammed the shock baton into the creature's chest. A burst of energy crackled through the air. The creature screamed and fell back, hitting one of the tanks. "Run," Mason shouted. They rushed out of the chamber, this time heading toward the command center marked on the map. The hallway was smoother here, cleaner. Maybe it was used more often in the past. Syria leaned against the wall, breathing hard. You didn't have to protect me like that. Mason looked at her. Yes, I did. I'm not leaving you behind. For the first time, Syria gave a small smile. It was weak but real. They reached the door to the command center. Mason used a tool to unlock it. Inside, the room was filled with consoles, screens, and a large window that looked out over the ruined facility. Syria walked over to one of the panels and placed her hand on it. The system came to life, glowing softly under her touch. This place still has power, she said. Mason looked at the screens. One of them showed a map of the entire building. The red dot was moving through the feeding zone. The creature was looking for them. There's an emergency door on the surface, Syria said. We can escape through it, but it needs a special code. Can you unlock it? She nodded. I think so, but we'll need time. Mason grabbed a metal rod and placed it across the door, just in case the creature came back. You'll have your time, he said. I'll hold the door if I have to. She looked at him again. Why are you helping me, Mason? He paused, then answered simply, because you deserve to be free. Syria turned back to the screen, and her fingers moved quickly over the controls. And somewhere behind them, the creature roared again, getting closer. The emergency door was closer now, but the time they had left was running out fast. The creature had stopped hunting for a moment, but it was still out there, lurking in the shadows of the facility. Mason stood by the door, his eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. Every creak, every sound made his muscles tighten. The weight of the situation was starting to press in on him. He had promised to protect Syria, but he had no idea how much longer he could hold out. Syria, however, didn't seem as worried. She stood at the control panel, her fingers flying over the screen. Her face was focused, and though she looked exhausted, there was a calm in her that Mason had not seen before. She had been through so much, and yet she was still standing, still trying. Almost done, Syria said, glancing over at Mason. Just need a few more seconds. Mason nodded, but his eyes never left the door. He could hear the creature moving in the distance, its growls echoing softly. He gripped the metal rod tighter, ready for whatever was coming next. Syria's voice broke the silence. I think I can open it now. A faint beep sounded from the panel, followed by a soft click. The emergency door began to slowly rise. That's it, Mason said, a sense of relief flooding through him. They were almost there. The escape was so close. But just as they moved toward the door, the creature's roar filled the hall again, much louder this time. Mason cursed under his breath. It's coming. Syria froze. She could feel the fear creeping in again, but she pushed it down. She knew they couldn't stop now. They couldn't afford to waste another second. Go! Go! Mason shouted as he rushed toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure if they could make it, but they had to try. He stepped through the opening first, turning back to grab Syria's hand. She stepped forward, but before she could fully cross the threshold, the door slammed down with a loud clank. No, Syria shouted, panic rising in her voice. Mason pulled her back quickly, just as the creature rounded the corner. Its glowing red eyes locked onto them, and it let out a terrifying screech. The creature charged forward, its claws scraping the floor. Mason swung the metal rod at it, hitting it across the face. The creature stumbled back for a moment, but it didn't stop. It roared again, more furious than ever. We need to get out of here now, Mason said, fear creeping into his voice. Syria looked at the control panel. It was still locked. They were trapped. I can't open it, she cried. It's not responding. The creature was getting closer, and Mason knew they didn't have much time. In desperation, he grabbed a nearby piece of broken machinery and threw it at the creature. It hit the floor with a loud bang, but it only seemed to anger the creature more. Siria's eyes widened as she saw something flicker on the control panel. A small green light appeared. "I can try something else," she said, her voice filled with hope. "Hold on." She quickly typed in a code on the screen, her fingers shaking. The creature was nearly upon them now, its claws reaching out to grab them. "Come on," Mason muttered, stepping in front of Siria to shield her. Then, with a sudden hiss, the emergency door began to rise again. "Go," Siria shouted, and Mason grabbed her hand, pulling her through the opening just as the creature lunged. They ran as fast as they could, the sound of the creature's heavy footsteps close behind them. The door began to close, but they were just in time. The last part of the door slammed shut with a loud clang, trapping the creature on the other side. Mason and Siria didn't stop running. They moved quickly down the hall, weaving around broken panels and debris. The air felt heavy with tension, but they were free. For now. "We made it," Mason said, panting. "But that thing is still inside. It won't stop." Siria nodded, her face pale. "We don't have much time." They reached the elevator that led to the surface. The light above flickered on, but the elevator doors refused to open. Siria stepped forward and pushed the button again, but nothing happened. "Let me try," Mason said, stepping up to the control panel. He looked at the wiring and pushed a few buttons, but it was clear they were out of luck. "It's not working." "There's another way," Siria said, turning toward a small hatch in the wall. "Follow me." She pulled open the hatch, revealing a ladder leading up. Without hesitation, they began climbing. Each step felt like an eternity. The sound of the creature pounding on the walls below them only made their fear grow. At the top of the ladder, Siria opened a small door. They were outside, but the danger wasn't over. The creature's roar echoed from below, and Mason could hear the metal walls creaking under its strength. "We have to keep moving," Mason said, looking around. The surface was desolate, and the only way to go was forward. Siria nodded, and they started running again, not looking back. Mason and Siria ran as fast as they could, the wind biting at their faces. The desolate surface of the moon stretched out before them, covered in a layer of gray dust and rocks. There was nothing but endless emptiness in all directions. The air was thin, and every breath felt colder than the last. Behind them, the facility was slowly becoming a shadow in the distance. The creature was still inside, trapped, for now. But Mason knew it wouldn't be long before it broke free. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. They had to get to safety, and they had to do it fast. "Where are we going?" Mason asked, glancing over at Siria. She was breathing heavily but kept up with him, her determination clear. "There's a shuttle nearby. It's my only way off this moon. The control center is just a little further. We can make it." Mason didn't question her. He didn't have time to. All he cared about was keeping them both alive. They reached the edge of the facility's landing platform, where a small rusted shuttle sat. It looked abandoned, but it was their only hope. A few flickering lights on the shuttle's side told Mason it still had power, though it wasn't much. Siria ran up to the hatch and pulled at the door. It was stuck, rusted shut. Mason joined her, and together they forced it open with all their strength. The smell of old engine fuel and dust hit them as the door creaked open. Once inside, Mason rushed to the cockpit, flipping switches and checking systems. Siria was right behind him, helping to stabilize some of the controls. They didn't have much time. The creature would be free soon, and they would need to leave before it found them again. Mason glanced at the small monitor in the cockpit. The escape route was clear, but something caught his attention. A red warning light flashed on the control panel, and a loud beeping sound filled the air. "What's wrong?" Siria asked, her voice filled with worry. "I don't know," Mason said, checking the screen. "We're not going anywhere unless we disable the security lock on the shuttle." Saria's eyes went wide. That security lock has a failsafe. It won't open unless the facility's main systems are shut down. Mason cursed under his breath. They needed to shut down the systems, but the creature was still inside, and they were running out of time. Saria looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. You have to go back. I'll stay here and try to keep the shuttle ready for launch. No, Mason said quickly. We go together. I can't let you do that, she said, shaking her head. If you go back, you'll only be putting both of us at risk. I know what I'm doing. You need to go now. Mason stared at her, his heart pounding. He didn't want to leave her. But Saria was right. If he didn't disable the lock, they wouldn't be able to leave. The creature would find them sooner or later, and then it would be over for both of them. I'll be back as fast as I can, he said, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. Just stay here, and don't let that thing get you. Saria nodded, but there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. Be careful. Mason turned and ran back toward the hatch. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The moment he stepped outside, he felt the cold air hit him like a slap. The sun was setting on the horizon, casting long shadows over the barren landscape. The facility was still visible in the distance, but the growls of the creature were growing louder. He had no time to waste. He sprinted back to the facility, his heart racing. The creature's roar echoed in his ears, and he could feel it getting closer. When Mason reached the main building, he found an entrance that was still open, a gap in the broken metal where the door had been torn off. He slipped inside, moving quietly through the darkened hallways. The lights flickered on as he moved deeper into the building. The sound of claws scraping across the metal floor sent a chill down his spine. He couldn't see the creature, but he could feel its presence. Mason found the control room and approached the terminal. He took a deep breath, then began typing furiously on the console. The system was old, but it still had some power. He just needed to override the lock on the shuttle, disable the security systems, and get out. As his fingers flew over the keys, a loud crash echoed behind him. The creature had found him. Mason whipped around, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature was standing at the entrance of the control room, its glowing red eyes locked on him. It hissed, its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. Mason's hand hovered over the console, his fingers shaking. He had to finish. There was no choice. The creature roared and lunged toward him. Mason dove behind a table, the creature's claws slamming into the metal with a deafening crash. He could hear it snarling, moving toward him. His pulse raced. He had to get the code, but he couldn't let the creature get any closer. With a final, desperate movement, Mason entered the last sequence. The red light on the terminal turned green, and the security lock on the shuttle was disabled. But the creature wasn't done yet. It slammed into the table, knocking it over. Mason looked toward the exit. There was no time to fight. He ran. He ran faster than he ever had before, not looking back. Mason ran with every ounce of strength in his legs. His heart pounded in his chest, and the sound of the creature's roars grew louder behind him. The walls of the facility blurred past him as he sprinted toward the shuttle, the distance between him and the creature closing fast. His breath came in ragged gasps, but he couldn't afford to slow down. Every step felt like it might be his last. When he reached the shuttle, he saw Saria standing at the hatch, her hands gripping the edges. She was waiting for him, her eyes wide with concern. "Come on," Mason shouted, his voice strained. Saria hesitated for just a moment, then quickly stepped aside, allowing him to rush inside. He barely made it through before the doors slammed shut behind him. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and Mason collapsed into the seat next to Saria, his body shaking from the adrenaline. The control panel in front of them flickered as the shuttle prepared to launch. "It's not over yet," Mason said, his voice low. "We have to leave quickly. That thing is still inside the facility." Saria nodded. Her face was pale, but there was a new sense of determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. With a steady hand, Saraya initiated the launch sequence. The shuttle's engines roared as it lifted off the ground, pushing against the gravity of the moon. The darkness outside swallowed them as they rose higher into the sky. "We're safe," Mason muttered, but he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that still clung to him. The creature might still be lurking beneath them, waiting to strike. Saraya looked out the window, her gaze distant. "I don't think it will stop chasing us." Mason frowned. "What do you mean?" Saraya took a deep breath before turning to face him. "This isn't just a creature. It's been changed, modified by the same people who captured me. They experimented with it, just like they experimented." Mason clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. "That's insane. They turned it into a monster." Saraya nodded. "They used me too. They thought they could control my abilities, make me part of their plans. But they never understood what I was, or who I am." Mason's heart softened. He could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of the past that she had carried with her all this time. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," Mason said quietly. "We're in this together." Saraya looked at him, surprised by his words. For a moment, there was a softness in her eyes, something Mason hadn't seen before. It was like she was starting to believe in him, to trust him. "Thank you," she whispered. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, and the cold void of space greeted them. Mason watched as the moon they had just escaped from grew smaller in the distance, until it was nothing more than a speck of light against the endless dark. They were free. For now. But Mason knew the danger wasn't over. The creature was still out there. Somewhere. "We need to get as far away from that moon as possible," Mason said, looking at the navigation controls. "And we need to figure out what to do next." Saraya nodded. "I agree. But for now, let's just get away." Mason looked at her, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in her expression. The journey ahead would be dangerous. They still didn't know the full extent of the creature's power, or what kind of experiments had been done on it. But one thing was certain, they would face whatever came their way together. Saraya's hand reached for the controls. "I'll set a course for the nearest station. It's not far, but it should be safe." Mason relaxed slightly, knowing that they had a chance to rest. But even as they drifted away from the moon, his mind kept racing. He knew the creature would eventually find them. It always did. But Saraya had something the creature didn't: trust. And together, that might be the one thing that could help them survive. And so, as the shuttle floated silently through the vastness of space, Mason and Saraya both knew that their journey wasn't over. There was still much to be done, and many dangers ahead. But they would face it together, stronger than ever.